without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Matt Tenney.
I had arranged the unauthorized delivery of almost $3 million. Once I had it arranged, reality hit me in the face, and I said, there is no way I can try to take this money. I didn't want to be a criminal. I didn't even have a plan for picking the money up, so I abandoned the whole thing. During the 5.5 months while I awaited my court-martial, I spent an average of 22 hours per day alone in that cell. As you can imagine, this was the worst experience of my life. And once I wrapped my head around it, I began to adjust, and I actually started to consciously look for what opportunities might be found in that situation. So within a short time, I was practicing awareness training during just about every moment of the day. And after 6 months of diligent effort, I noticed that I was thriving in one of the most stressful environments in the world. In fact, I was happier right there in the brig with nothing than I had ever been in my entire life. So this gave me a tremendous amount of faith in the practice, and I decided to go all the way. I transformed the brig into a monastery, and I spent the last 3 years of my time there living and training as a monk. And as a result of this training, I discovered both the joy and the power of a life devoted to serving others. And that led to the work I do now with kids kicking cancer. Now, as I started to notice the power of devoting my life to serving others in my own life, the question eventually came to mind, I wonder what would happen if businesses operated in this way. I thought, if business leaders were 100% focused on serving both their customers and their employees, they would probably have tremendous success. By taking better care of their employees and doing whatever they could to make their lives better, those employees would come to work more fully engaged, which would result in better performance, better products, and better customer service. So I started looking for examples of companies that might be operating in this way to see if they even existed. And it turns out that there's a whole philosophy of leadership based on this idea of serving others. It's aptly named servant leadership. Perhaps the best example I know of a company that is devoted to creating a culture of servant leadership is a company called NextJump, based in New York City. This is a picture of Charlie Kim, who's the founder and CEO, and he's become a friend of mine because this guy's incredibly inspiring. But Charlie and the other leaders at NextJump are always looking for ways that they can make the lives of their people better. And they're creating an entire culture of people who are devoted to helping others. I would argue that their culture is actually stronger than the famous culture at Google. Yes, NextJump has free, healthy food for their employees that they can eat whenever they want. They have an on-site gym with personal trainers and tons of free classes. But NextJump takes building a culture of servant leadership and caring for their people even further. Here's one example. NextJump actually does their employees' laundry for them. They have a practice at NextJump that they routinely ask their people, what can we do to help you be happier, both at home and at work? And whenever they hear the same thing more than twice, they assign a leadership person to look into it. Well, a couple years ago, some employees said, what would be really nice is if we didn't have to spend half of every other weekend in a New York City laundromat. So Charlie said, well, if my people are happier on their weekends and enjoy their weekends more, they're going to be more productive when they come into work. So he asked his people, how much would it cost for us to do this? And he learned that his employees were not even asking for the company to pay for it. They just wanted the company to facilitate the process so that they could enjoy their weekends more. Charlie said, well, tell me how much it would cost anyhow. It turns out that although dry cleaning is pretty expensive, just standard washing and drying is not that bad. So nowadays, employees at NextJump bring their laundry into work in a bag just like this. It's taken to be washed, dried, and folded and put back into a clean bag, and then they take it home a couple days later. I don't think you can read this, but below the NextJump logo, it reads, "My company gets my laundry, I get my weekends back." So then NextJump encourages their people to go out and serve in the same way. And one of the ways they do this is with a program called Code for a Cause. So at NextJump, they get some of the top computer programmers in the world working for them. And what the leaders at NextJump do is encourage them to go out and spend at least 2 weeks every year writing code for any nonprofit they want to. And they're paid their full salary to go do it. Now, the results of this program are incredible. These people go out in teams of 3, and they accomplish in 10 days what some of these nonprofits have been trying to do for years. So they come back to the office feeling like rock stars, inspired to continue to grow and to inspire the people around them to grow so they can go out and serve in the same way. Another way they encourage their people to be servant leaders is with an award called the Avenger Award. I think they name all their awards after superheroes, actually. But the Avenger Award is $20,000 and a 3rd week of paid vacation. This award does not go to the top salesperson. It doesn't go to the top programmer. It goes to the #1 peer-voted, most helpful, selfless person in the company. It goes to the top servant leader. That's how devoted NextJump is to building a culture of servant leadership. Now, what do you suppose happens when you build a culture like that? Well, you get the best people in your industry working for you. They're fully engaged while they're on the clock, and they don't want to leave. In 2012, NextJump had almost 18,000 people apply for 35 positions. Let's think about how powerful that is for a second. They get to select several hundred of the smartest, most talented people in the industry out of a pool of 18,000 applicants, and then they get to handpick the top 35 people from that pool that are the best fit for their culture, people that are humble and are driven and aspire to help others. The employees at NextJump are so engaged that they've actually asked to have 2 bedrooms put in the New York City office so that when they want to stay late working on a project, they can just sleep over. Now, at first, Charlie said, "No way. People are going to think I'm running a sweatshop here." But the employees were really adamant about it. They made a good case. They said, well, look, if we want to stay late because we're really excited working on a project and we take the subway back and forth to work, we lose like 2 hours of sleep. If we could just spend the night here, we'd get those 2 hours of sleep back and we'd wake up in the morning refreshed and ready to go right back to work. So now there are 2 bedrooms in the New York City office. Can you imagine a company where the employees are so engaged that they ask to be able to sleep over in the office? As we continue to practice mindfulness, we can actually develop a tremendous amount of freedom from our habitual reaction to problems and challenges. With the consistent practice of mindfulness, one thing that develops is very high levels of self-awareness. So with increased self-awareness, we can actually observe these internal reactions to problems as they arise, and it's as though there's a little bit of space around them. So we might find ourselves dwelling on a problem or even complaining about a problem internally, but we don't have to follow it. With that space, we have the room to say, well, instead I can just ask, how is this going to help me to serve others? And also, with consistent practice of mindfulness, what I've noticed is that we eventually start to see opportunities everywhere that we look. One of the most interesting aspects of the practice is that instead of avoiding problems or ignoring them, we're strongly encouraged to actually fully experience them and to investigate them and see what we can learn. And what happens when we do this is we start to see that, wow, I can experience an unpleasant moment without losing my peace of mind. And the more often we have this insight, the more that we just kind of welcome problems and unpleasant experiences into our life because we know that A, we're going to learn from it, and 2, we can actually realize freedom from suffering right in the present moment. So imagine if we start to see things like being cold or having an itch or having an ache or being hungry or annoyed. If we start to see all these things as opportunities, our problems appear as opportunities as well. And in fact, we start to see just about every experience of life as an opportunity. And this can fundamentally change the way we view the world. But I have good news. Becoming an awesome human being is highly trainable. And this is another reason why I mentioned my experience with mindfulness. Mindfulness training helps us to become less caught up in our own thinking, less self-centered, so that we can be more open to how we can serve the people around us. In fact, there's a tremendous body of research showing just how powerful mindfulness training can be for helping us to become more kind and compassionate. And there was one study where they measured a longtime practitioner of mindfulness, again, using fMRI brain scans. And they were measuring this longtime practitioner of mindfulness versus a control group of 150 people to determine their abilities to generate brain activity in the area of the brain most associated with compassion, which is an area in the left prefrontal cortex. This longtime practitioner of mindfulness ended up 2 standard deviations outside of the bell curve. That is an outlier to an outlier. It's off the chart and then off of that chart. Any reasonable researcher would redo this experiment because they would have assumed that a measurement error had occurred. But this experiment has been replicated numerous times with very similar results. And in fact, it was later found that mindfulness training actually changes the structure of the brain in ways that allow us to be more kind and compassionate. And the best news is that we can see these changes in as little as 8 weeks of training. Apparently, it went something like this. So the flight attendant gets on the mic and she says, "Welcome aboard Flight 123 to Chicago. To operate your seatbelt, insert the metal tab into the buckle. It works just like every other seatbelt. If you don't know how to operate one, you probably shouldn't be in public unsupervised." Now, in the event of a sudden loss in cabin pressure, oxygen mask will descend from the ceiling. Stop screaming, grab the mask, and place it over your face. If you're traveling with a small child, put your mask on first and then help your child with theirs. If you're traveling with 2 small children, decide now which one you love more. Now, although this is just another silly example, it is a very good reminder that we need to put our mask on before we can help other people, right? And if we pass out because we have no oxygen, we can't help anybody. And in the same way, I think it's really important for us to take care of ourselves in the appropriate way to be able to best serve other people. So now when we start applying some of these ideas and tools, we become what I call the ultimate leader. To me, the ultimate leader is somebody who is always leading by example, whether or not they have a title, simply by being an awesome human being. They're motivated to continually grow as a person and become the best person that they can be, but that motivation is based on the desire to serve others. And they also work to ensure that they treat every single person with kindness and compassion and respect. The most important moment is always the present moment, because it's the only time over which we have any control. The most important person is always the person you're with right now, who's right by your side, because you don't have any idea if you're ever going to see another person in your life again. And the most important task is to make the person at your side happy. And that alone is the sole pursuit of life. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention today. I appreciate it.